Hey, welcome back to the Broker's Voice. I am excited this week. I've got a friend up here, somebody who's doing some really cool things in the industry, joining me on today's show, Chris Wolpert from GBS Benefits. But before we get there, I want to make a quick announcement for our sponsor, Agency Annex. Listen, if you're an insurance agency, you have a website, and you were to go take a look at it right now, ask yourself, does our website align with what is coming out of our mouth when we go meet with prospects and clients? It probably doesn't. So if you know your website could use a little upgrade, do yourself a favor, reach out to the guys at Agency Annex. They have built an agency dedicated just to help insurance agencies build better websites. In fact, I'm going to put Steve's email right there, Steve at XY Web Solutions. Reach out to him today. You wouldn't be disappointed. They built my site and I couldn't be happier. So get a hold of Agency Annex today to take your website to the next level. All right, let's get into this week's show. I'm excited to have one and only Chris Wolpert from the Pacific Northwest join us. Chris, what's up, man?
Hey, Andy. How's it going, man?
Good. I am doing well. Well, I'm excited to have you, Chris, for multiple reasons. You've built a cool little brand using social media. You've taken that brand and applied it to another area that so many advisors fail to look at, and that's writing a book. So I'm excited to talk about that and what you've done with that. But before we get there, I always start with this question, Chris, because most of us did not get in this industry by design. How in the world did you find yourself in insurance?
Yes, good question for anybody that finds themselves in this in this career path, right? Well, and mine was figuring out what I did not want to do. So what I mean by that was I went to school to be a journalist, and more specifically, I wanted to be a sports writer. But the problem was at the end of my senior year, I did an internship where I had an opportunity to do that, and it was in many ways it was a lot of fun. It was very eye-opening, though. What I realized through that process is that I didn't necessarily want to do that as a career. And so what I ended up doing was I took the job that was going to pay me the most, that had the best benefits, and that happened to be in the insurance industry. So it's been a meandering road even since I've gotten into the industry itself. But that was the original story, was kind of more of a writer by trade. Got into insurance and haven't been able to get out since. So
I love how you haven't been able to get out. And we're going to talk about how you've used your skill of writing as you made the decision to write the book. So I'm excited to talk about that. So here you are in the insurance industry. One thing I want to talk to you about, because I love what you're doing. Every week now, you have kind of built a little social media brand, mainly on LinkedIn, around telling fables and using these fables to talk about life and business lessons. So for the people who don't know you, haven't seen them, kind of talk about why you decided to do that, why you chose fables, and kind of how you're using them right now with your social media strategy, because I think it's awesome.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay. So what happened was a couple years ago, this was in 2019. I had, and this isn't meant to be a pitch for pitching from the stage, but it's going to be. So what happened was I hired this speaking coach, this stud Andy Neary, who helped me put together a talk that I was going to go deliver, put on a seminar in my local market up here in Tacoma. And in doing that, there was other people I was kind of drawing inspiration from. One of them was another guy in the industry who used a fable to illustrate a point about how I can't remember exactly what fable it was now, but how the lion was like the insurance carriers and that type of thing. And I thought, oh, that's so clever. And at the same time, my oldest daughter was in the drama club at her elementary school, and they were putting on a play that was all about Aesop's fables. So I kind of had these two things happening at once. And it was something that I incorporated one of those fables into my talk. I don't know if you remember that, Andy, but I did. And it was such a, just, compared to the rest of the talk, it was so effortless. It was so easy. You're just simply, you're sharing this story that involves these animal characters. It's, many times I think geared towards kids, but there's always a lesson at the end, right? There's something to learn from it, from this, minute and a half, 2 minute long story. And I just felt like, man, this illustrates a point so well. And there's dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of these stories, of these Aesop's fables. And so what I did was I just decided, this is something that's, as I'm building out my brand, as I'm trying to hold myself more accountable and do more marketing things and kind of bring people into my world and not just tell them, you're paying too much for healthcare and, those kinds of things. I mean, or going in and talking about features and benefits and plan design. I mean, I think most CFOs or HR directors would rather get a stick in the eye. So, um, so I just felt like it was such a great way to draw people in and for them to kind of get to know you and build a brand around some of that. And so that was really kind of the genesis behind it. It was a lot of these. It was kind of the perfect storm of all these events happening at once, and then finally it was like, it was like a light bulb went off. Like, oh, duh! Like this is something so obvious that nobody else is doing, but yet all these stories were written 2,500 years ago. Why don't I just, um, use what's already there and make it kind of put my own spin on it, put my own flavor on it, I guess, if you will.
No, and I love it because you're right. And I think what you realized is you're telling stories
Yep.
that are easy to tell. Like you said, the storytelling aspect of it's fun, it comes naturally, but it teaches us things about life and business, in this case, insurance, where it's like once you hear the fable, you're like, well, duh, that makes all the sense in the world. And that's the power of storytelling, is if you're able to take complex issues like we work in every single day and make them easy to understand through analogies, through fables. It's a powerful, powerful weapon that you have. So talk to me about this. Two things. You've gotten really consistent. I mean, you now have been doing these fables for at least a year and a half on LinkedIn. Talk about number one, where you pull each of those fables from, because I'm curious. And number two, walk somebody through that first video you did
Oh
to
God.
how you feel today going on camera, because there's a lot of advisors who are afraid to put themselves on camera. And so
Yeah.
I'd love for you to talk about that journey you went through, that first time you hit play to like today. What's that feeling like for you?
Yeah. Well, the where I get them is basically I what I ended up doing when I decided to make this a series was I hopped on Amazon, found a couple of books. I kind of read some of the reviews. I kind of figured out, okay, because some of them are more geared towards kids, where they might have 24 stories, right, with lots of pictures and whatever. Well, I got a couple that were a little bit longer. So I've got one book that has several hundred stories. Now, some of them, we always think of like they've got, there's a lion, there's a fox appears in a lot of them, goats, whatever, all these animals. There's a ton of them that have different Greek gods that are associated with them. So I've kind of stayed away from those. I have sprinkled a few of those in, but for the most part, I tend to focus on the ones that have the animals or have a moral that I haven't told yet, right? So some of them kind of have overlapping moral or overlapping, but I just kind of go through there and figure out which ones I haven't told yet, which ones I want to tell. And I even at this point, it's been over 2 years now that I've been doing it, and I still have I still have so many to draw from, even now. And the other thing is too, is I'm thinking that at some point I'll go back to some of those early ones and I'll re-record them because, to your point, I mean, in the beginning, it would take me an hour and I would go through take after take after take after take and not feel confident the whole time. And then I'd have to like, I got pretty good on the editor on using iMovie because I'd have to cut so much out, and so anyway, so you get better through repetition, and now I've kind of got a flow and that type of thing. So now I'll record for about 10 minutes. I never stop it or restart it or whatever. But basically, I kind of break it up into three sections where I've got the beginning of the story, and then I've got kind of the end of the story, and then I've got the moral. And so what I'll do is for each line or for each kind of section, I'll do 2 to 3 takes of that, and then that's it. So I'll do the entire recording time is probably about 10 minutes now. And then what I'll do is I'll go back and then chop that up and pick whichever take that I feel like, I was I just came across best, right? So I'll just pick the best take from each of those. Um, so even the editing process is a lot faster now too. where I'm not, spending a ton of time. Because in the beginning, yeah, I was spending a lot of time on it, but I've also kind of got this nice, I've got this nice flow now that I don't have to think about it so much, right? And I just kind of get in that mind space as soon as I hit record, and then get through it in 10 minutes rather than 60. So, and again, it makes it a lot easier to edit when you've got that small, that your video's that much shorter than when I'm like constantly stopping and restarting and deleting and all that kind of stuff. But it for me, it was like I just had to do it. I just kind of realized I'm like, I watched you, I watched somebody like Eric Silverman and a number of others, of people that would get on video, and it was like, man, there's not hardly anybody's doing this. So if I just do this, I'll already kind of differentiate myself just by the nature of doing something that's a little bit different, and that is really not that difficult once you get started doing it.
Well, and there's 3 lessons that came out of what you just said. Number 1, let's face it, in the insurance industry, when it comes to marketing, the bar is pretty low. You can find ways to differentiate yourself. Number 2, you knew when you started the videos, you weren't going to be good at first, but over time you've gotten better to the point now it's probably very easy for you to hit play on that camera. And then number 3, it's the fact that you can go back to a post you made a year ago and literally remake that post, and no one's going to remember that you posted it last year. And that's the beauty of repurposing content. So let's now dive into the real reason, the main reason I wanted you here, because I love what you've done. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say one of the things that I've done is there have been times where I haven't had time to do a fable that week or whatever the case is. And I'll usually batch them. I'll usually do 4 or 5 at a time. But there's been times where I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have a new fable this week. I'll pull one from my library and repost it. And nobody knows. Nobody has any clue, unless it was coronavirus and I had my long hair. But other than that, they wouldn't be able to tell. So anyhow.
I love that. Well, let's talk about, because you've used fables and now you've done something with it I absolutely love. And you decided to write a book. The book is called Hit Zero: The Quest to Make Healthcare a Controllable Expense. So I know you're in the process of launching that as we speak. What I love about it is so many in our industry, Chris, want to write a book, and it's always around, here's the problem with healthcare and we're going to fix it. But it's like you decided to take pieces of your brand, which is the fables. I don't know if you liked comic books as a kid, but you've taken it and you've written a book in a way that's melded and aligned with your brand. So talk about why you decided to write the book, and then talk about why it is different, or how it's different from a lot of the health insurance, healthcare books we see out there right now.
Yeah. Well, what I've been telling people when I start to tell them that, I wrote a comic book, I wrote a hero's journey story, is that basically what I've done is I've taken it's Lord of the Rings meets The Office and this next generation of healthcare benefits. And so they kind of think on that for a second, and it's like, oh wow, okay, that's really interesting. And they can't quite picture it in their mind because those are really 3 very different things. But that's how I like to frame it to begin with. So what I did was, like I had noticed that there were some healthcare books out there. There were some insurance books related to health insurance and et cetera, and employee benefits and all that. But it was very much, and I even started to write a book that way. I started to do an outline and just realized this is the most boring damn thing ever. I don't even want to write this. Nobody's going to want to read this, right? And it was like, okay, if I'm going to do something that is, part marketing piece, part educational, and a little bit of a vanity project mixed in, I want to write a hero's journey story. And then to take it a step further, what I decided to do was then have a lot of images, right? Because then that way I felt like as though, again, it's going to be different from what anybody else has seen. Some people are going to hate it. They're going to think it's stupid and corny and whatever. And maybe it is, but it's also, it is authentic to me. It's something that is, I did like comic books as a kid. I was never much of an artist, but I loved the stories. And who doesn't, right? When you think about some of those classic stories and things like that of a hero's journey, who doesn't aspire to be like that? And humans have for thousands of years now told stories like this as a way to relate to their environment, to adapt, and to kind of have a piece of themselves that they can associate with the greater universe, I guess, as it is. So anyway, so what I did was I decided, okay, rather than just have one hero for the story, a lot of times what I found is especially these days, you really have to be able to build consensus with multiple people, particularly in the C-suite. But typically it comes down to the people that really need to be on board, the ones that are the most involved in this decision are the CFOs from the finance perspective and the HR directors from the people's perspective. And so what I did was I created a story that uses a CFO who's kind of the reluctant hero of the story. And then I used the HR director who's more of the catalyst hero, because every hero's journey story has the hero is kind of in one of those two camps where, for example, you've got like in even in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker's more that reluctant hero. He's like, he just wants to stay on this planet with his aunt and uncle and stuff. And then, of course, his aunt and uncle die, and then he's forced into this journey where he has to then become or figure out, how to become a Jedi and all those kinds of things. And then you've got kind of more the catalyst hero type, which might be somebody like in Beverly Hills Cop, where Eddie Murphy's character he's kind of the catalyst hero. He's pulling along everybody else in his precinct. He's kind of pulling everybody else in a direction. And so those are kind of the two heroes, the hero archetypes. So I started with that, where we've got kind of this push-pull between those two. And the king of the castle, the CEO of the business, tells him, look, we've had such a difficult year between, I think what I referred to it as is the plague and the riots, but obviously what I'm referring to is coronavirus and all the protests and stuff from last year. But we need to figure out a different way to do this, because I think, anybody who says that over the last, since 2020, that they are doing everything the same, I think they're lying to you as well as themselves, right? And so anyway, so that's kind of the premise that I started with, and they had to go out into the wilderness and find a guide, and in the form of this mysterious creature, the Wolpertinger. And the Wolpertinger has the secrets on how to actually make healthcare a controllable cost and all this. And of course, what ends up happening is the heroes find themselves on this journey, and they're really the ones that have to find this for themselves. They're the ones that have this personal growth happen, and they have to return to the castle with the elixir, with the magic that's going to save the day. So ultimately, as you know from studying StoryBrand, and as I know from studying that as well, that's really what it's all about, is putting your prospective clients, putting those people that you're looking to get on your in your book of business or on your side. It's their story that you want to tell. It's them becoming the hero. It's not you being the hero for them. It's you being the guide for them. And so anyway, so that's the 10,000 foot overview of Hit
Well,
Zero.
and what you said, Chris, I was going to say it anyways. So thank you for saying it. Is number one, you put the hero's journey in the title. Like that's what storytelling is telling the hero's journey. You talked about StoryBrand. And number two, you pinpointed the right hero. Right. In our industry, I think we make the mistake that thinking we, the agents, are the heroes. No. The CEOs, CFOs, and HR directors that we work with, they're the heroes. We've got to tell their stories. So I absolutely love how you frame that. Now, I got to ask for the listeners, Wolpertanger. Now, there's a really interesting tie to talk about where you got the name Wolpertanger for a second.
Yeah, so I did not make that up. I that was co-opted. So there was obviously I'm active on LinkedIn, and there was a guy that I'm connected with on LinkedIn who was in the same pod as me, and he we'd been connected for a while, and he mentions this thing about the Wolpertinger. Have you ever heard of it? Well, he's over in the UK. I think he's originally from somewhere in Germany, and he's like, oh yeah, you got to look this thing up, the Wolpertinger. This is like a real thing. And I look it up, and it's basically it's very similar to what we associated as a jackalope, right? Where you've got a rabbit with the with antlers, with deer antlers. So over in Bavaria, of course, Bavaria, there's this legend of the Wolpertinger, which obviously it's a mythical creature. It's made up, but it's a jackalope that also has, not in addition to being a rabbit with the antlers. It's got owl wings. It's got red glowing eyes. It's got fangs. So it's kind of this like vicious creature and all this, and there's the story behind it, which there is a joke about this in the book itself too, but the story behind it is that that go out in the woods with a beautiful young woman, and then she has to like expose her breasts to get it for it to fall into a stupor, and then you can capture it easily. So obviously, it's this ruse, right? Anyways, so I make a joke about it in the story. But anyways, when I started to like read about this thing online, I got sucked in, and I thought, man, like that's the guide, and it's like literally part of my last name. So some things you just they just fall into place, and that was one of these things. And so to take this a step further in the story, I'm not spoiling anything here, but obviously the Wolpertinger is the guide in the end. And he's differentiated himself against the jackalopes, and the jackalopes, which everybody understands, that's your traditional kind of broker or brokerage model, where you're talking about features and benefits. You're, kind of bringing the same things each year. You're talking about how you can get, a 6% renewal increase rather than 12 or whatever. And so anyways, so it just so perfectly played into the imagery, and kind of, again, I struggled with that for a long time, was, who's the shadow character and how do I position that against the mentor or the guide character? And so that's how that happened, totally by accident.
It tells you were meant to write the
Just
book,
like my
man.
career, I guess.
It tells you were meant to write the book, man. That universe is always listening. Well, if somebody wants to get their hands on a copy of it, what is the best way to do that?
So right now it'd be on Amazon. Just type in Hit Zero Chris Wolpert. It literally, the paperback just got uploaded today. There was, formatting issues and all that. But so there's a paperback version. There's also a Kindle version that's available. I'm going to be posting that link on my website as well, gbsbenefitsgroup.com. But I'd say that the easiest, quickest way for most people would just be to hop onto Amazon, and you can find it there.
And I've also put your email right here, Chris. So if somebody has a question, they can get a hold of you right here if they got any questions about that. Well, man, thank you for being on the show today. I think what you're doing right now with the brand, building it around the whole theme of fables, comic books, and bringing them together in this book that you have written. Again, not that so I don't screw up the name here. It is Hit Zero: The Quest to Make Healthcare a Controllable Expense. Get a copy of it. If you're an HR professional, CFO watching this, or even a broker, Chris has done a fantastic job with writing a book in his style that aligns with his brand, that tells one hell of a story on how to fix this thing. So Chris, thank you again, man. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on here, Andy.
Absolutely. And if you're listening in, remember, when clarity and confidence collide, massive things happen. So go make it happen today.